Can I prove that you can't square a circle? I can prove that, absolutely. I can make that airtight case. Can I prove that I spent last night in Grand Rapids? Well, I did, but I can't. And I could find all kinds of witnesses, but it's a different level of proof.
Here's a sheet of paper. Show me the math.
Show you the math.
Yeah, no, I mean, proof is for mathematics, pure logic, and very little else. Proof is an extremely high standard. If you can't absolutely nail it down like that, then what you say is instead, I have lots of evidence. This is very well supported. But proof, now that's the ne plus ultra. This is the highest possible reach of evidence.
And I have had time after time after time debating this on the internet, mostly through my blog, Thinking Christian, thinkingchristian.net, that's the advertisement, is that because the dictionary says belief without proof, therefore belief without evidence, which is confronting the irrationality of the new atheism. Here's another advertisement. The greatest example of where Boghossian gets his definitions came from a talk he gave at Portland State University. It's called something like Jesus, the Easter Bunny and Fairy Tales, or something like that. And at the end of the talk, someone said, "What about faith in airplanes? I get on an airplane, I have faith that it will get me safely to where I need to go." And Boghossian said, "No, faith is only for religion. It's only for religion." And he pointed to an atheist person that he knew near the front row, and he said to this person, "Do you have faith?" And the atheist person said, "No, I don't have faith." And Boghossian said, "See? Okay, how does that qualify as evidence?" I think that was belief without evidence, if you ask me.
He found one person who agreed with him.
Okay, is anybody in here who agrees with me that I should get paid $1 million for coming here
Yes,
today?
Tom, absolutely.
Okay, good.
I'll take my fee later.
I've got it. Okay, that's proof. It's just
lame.
It's and he does all kinds of lame things. And here we get into. I was trying to find a clip and I couldn't find it. It's important to understand that Boghossian's self-identified goal is not, in spite of the title of the book, to create atheists. His identified, self-stated goal is to promote critical thinking. And he teaches critical thinking in his college. And so it's not about creating atheists. It's just about, if we get people thinking well, they will just automatically become atheists. That's just what happens when people think well. So he's promoting critical thinking. For example, in this lecture at Portland State, he said that Christians use miracles as evidence for our faith. And he said, let me tell you about a couple of miracles that they use: transubstantiation and tongues. Okay, some of you don't know what those are. Transubstantiation is a Roman Catholic doctrine that says that when the priest blesses the elements of the Eucharist, what in Protestant circles we call communion, they become the body and blood of Jesus Christ, not in their accidents, their properties, the things that you can see, taste, touch, smell, and so on, but in their substance, their essence, their whatever they are on the insideness. Is that a good way to put it? It's really hard. Anyway, that's a Roman Catholic doctrine. It says that when you take the Eucharist, you are actually partaking of the real body and blood of Jesus Christ. Now, here's the problem there, is that Boghossian says that Christians use that as evidence for faith. No, we don't. Nobody uses that as evidence for faith. Catholics who believe in the Eucharist do not use it as evidence for the faith. It's a miracle in their mind, but not a substantiating miracle, because there isn't something you can point to and say, this is a visible change. Tongues is a belief, is the idea that from Acts 2, mostly, and in 1 Corinthians, of praying in other tongues. And that's another controversial thing as to whether that's a real thing happening or not. But I have been in the apologetics business my whole adult life, either amateur or professional, more or less, and I have never, that I can remember, heard someone use that. So what Boghossian said was, Christians use these things as evidence for faith. Now, what's that fallacy called? He's setting up a straw man.
Right, that would be petitio principii, the begging of the question. The assuming that something miraculous has happened in order to claim that a miracle has happened.
Yeah, but the fallacy, I put you on the spot with a poorly worded question. The fallacy that Boghossian committed is called the straw man.
Oh, what he's committing.
Where he has set up a ridiculous version of Christianity, and it's a false version of Christianity, and he puffs on it and it falls over. But what he's knocked over is not what we believe. In another lecture, he said that there's only 10 things that can be said for faith. I only have time to tell you what 5 of them are. I forget what the first one is that he said. But second was, the number 2 thing that can be said in favor of faith is, I'm having a crisis of faith. How many of you who have faith in this room, don't be afraid, raise your hands, would say that the number 2 reason you have faith is because you're having a crisis of faith? Let the camera know that no one raised their hands.
0.
That's just making a ridiculous straw man version of Christianity, and he's calling this critical thinking. And it is a flaming fallacy.
Yeah, that is a travesty. And
it's awful.
Gets back to what we were saying before about needing to diminish and even dehumanize your antagonists. Paint them out as being people whose beliefs are so absurd and whose grounds are so flimsy or non-existent that everybody laughs and everybody says, well, yeah, that's stupid and we don't need to hold to that at all. That is how he's dealing with his potential antagonists. He's starting out by trying to box them up in an absurd little box and say, well, that's what they hold.
Now I want to see, I haven't tested this technology in this location, so I don't know what's going to happen. But let's see if we can hear him talk about another one of his values.
So, forget about reading the book.
He's talking about his own book.
We have to give people the tools so they're going to use it, or this torrent of insanity is just going to continue. So it's not enough that you read the book. That's like step 1. But no, almost never the people, and I'm always asked this, how do you do it? So that people, how do you have the patience to do it? I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe it's that I've taught for 25 years in overcrowded public universities, and I've heard just about anything anybody could possibly say. But I really think that part of the other thing is being genuinely open to revise your own beliefs. And in fact, when I do these interventions, if people say things that I don't know, the first thing I do is say, I don't know.
Genuinely open to revising your own beliefs. He says that over and over again. I could have found other clips, but that's the key phrase there. Boghossian claims to be genuinely open to revising his own beliefs. Let's see how genuinely open he is. It's on page 82. He asked people, what would it take for you to change your beliefs? And I think Tim's going to say something about that in a bit. Once they've given their response, I thank them. If they ask me what it would take for me to believe, I'll use a variation of American physicist Lawrence Krauss's example in his debate with William Lane Craig. If I walked out outside at night and all of the stars were organized to read, I am God communicating with you, believe in me, and every human being worldwide witnessed this in their native language, this would be... This would be suggestive, but far from conclusive, as it's a perception and could be a delusion.
So tell us, what would it take for you to answer your own question?
Something bigger than everybody seeing the stars reorganized in their own language to say, I am God communicating with you, believe in me. So, in other words, nothing.
Does it remind you of that phrase that Jesus uses where he says, in one of his parables. He has Abraham say, they have Moses and the prophets. If they will not believe them, they would not believe if one were to return to them from the dead.
Right.
He's kind of defined himself into a position where he seems genuinely open to the evidence, but actually he's placed himself beyond the reach of even crazy evidence that we can only imagine. Decide for yourselves, is that genuine openness to evidence? But there's a second problem.
Well, by the way, related to that,
Yeah.
the Richard Dawkins discussion, he had an online, you can find him having a conversation with Richard Dawkins, another famous atheist, and Dawkins said that even the return of Jesus Christ would not be conclusive evidence. And Boghossian didn't verbally say, I agree with that, but he also didn't raise any objection to it.
As I recall, he kind of agreed with it, whether verbally or non-verbally. I'm not remembering right now, but he was...
So maybe, for some people, maybe hell will be a place of saying, no, there is no God. No, there is no God. I don't know. I'm really speculating there, but...
But let's go one step further. Let's ask a question about his question. His question is, what would it take for you to give up your belief? Is that a fair question to ask about many normal beliefs? Okay, how many of you believe that you have hands? What would it take for you to give up your belief that you have hands? Yeah, you persuaded that a Cartesian demon exists? Okay, there are philosophical thought experiments that we do where we imagine that, we're massively deceived. But really...
what would it take to persuade you that a Cartesian demon exists?
A lot.
A lot.
Right.
Yeah.
And in many cases, we're almost at what would it take for you to give up your belief that Abraham Lincoln ever existed? The question takes one's breath away, right? Oh, there's so much that would have had to be different. I don't even know where to go with that question. That's one of the ways in which he wants to portray himself as being an epistemologist, teaching epistemology, but he's actually using these techniques that load in presuppositions that are highly questionable. Like, for any person who holds a belief, the belief is rationally held if and only if that person can specify what kind of evidence would cause him to give up the belief. I can tell you some things that would weaken my belief that I have hands, right? If I looked down and suddenly saw only the stumps of arms and found that I couldn't pick up this legal pad except between my arms and other things like that, then I would be worried. Either something has happened to my hands or something has happened to my mind. But that would weaken my belief. I could maybe go there. But when he demands, tell me what it would take to make you give it up, he's asking a question which we cannot expect normal, reasonable people to answer about many normal, reasonable beliefs.
Right.
Therefore, if they find themselves somewhat flustered and flummoxed when he asks it about the existence of God, that just means they're in the same state they would be in about the existence of Abraham Lincoln or other things. By itself, that does not show anything about the lack of rationality of their belief. They may, in fact, be irrational. They may believe true things for bad reasons. That's possible. But that does not by itself go any distance to showing that their belief is irrational. And what he's training his street epistemologists to do is to use techniques like this. They come up to someone who's wholly unprepared, wholly unsuspecting. Bam! They hit him with that. How many of you know what the knockout game is? Right?
Ambush.
Bunch of thugs deciding to ambush people, see if they can knock them out with a single punch. How does that work? Some thug runs up behind a guy and hits him in the head before the guy knows what's up. Guess what? It works. They knock some people out that way. And